Singapore in Southeast Asia boasts a rich history and a unique blend of cultures. Originally a humble fishing village, it was transformed into a thriving trading hub under British rule in the early 19th century, thanks to its strategic location. Gaining independence in 1965, Singapore evolved into a global financial powerhouse, renowned for its efficient governance and innovation. Visitors are drawn to its modernity and tradition, from futuristic landmarks like Marina Bay Sands to treasures in Chinatown and Little India. Jenny Cheok, born Cheok Cheng Kid in Singapore in 1941, grew up in what was then part of the British-administered Straits Settlements. After losing her father at a young age, her mother remarried To Kim Seng and had a daughter, Irene, with whom Jenny shared a close bond. With limited formal education, Jenny spoke little English, having left school after just 3 years of elementary education. In 1957, she married Yui Chin Chuan in a traditional Chinese ceremony and later became a mother to a son and a daughter. The marriage, however, did not last, and Jenny became estranged from her husband. By 1963, 22-year-old Jenny was officially separated from Yui, who also had custody of their children. Jenny worked as a waitress and barmaid at the Odeon Bar and Restaurant at North Bridge Road, a one-way road which stretches north of the Singapore River. One day in May of 1963 would change the trajectory of Jenny's life forever when she crossed paths with 24-year-old Sunny Ang. Sunny Ang Su Swan, born in 1939 in Singapore, came from a middle-class family and displayed exceptional intelligence with an IQ of 128. English educated and a lover of reading books, he excelled academically, graduating from Victoria School in 1955 and earning his senior Cambridge certificate the following year. Initially training as a teacher, Ang later pursued pilot training on a government scholarship, but was dismissed for repeatedly violating safety regulations. He also dabbled in motorsports, participating in the 1961 Singapore Grand Prix at the Old Thompson Road circuit, where the inaugural race was won by Ian Barnwell from Malaysia in an Aston Martin DB3S. The event was held, quote, in support of the government-sponsored Visit Singapore, the Orient Year tourism campaign. Sunny Ang was a classically attractive man with a charmingly mischievous, eccentric personality, known also for his passion for scuba diving. Despite his charisma, Ang's professional pursuits were less successful. He ultimately abandoned careers in teaching, aviation, and law. In 1961, following the Singapore Grand Prix, he was fined after being convicted of negligent driving, which resulted in a pedestrian's death. The following year, he received a probation sentence for attempting burglary. After his second conviction, Ang, who was seen by one of his defense lawyers as, quote, arrogant and unrepentant, aspired to study law part-time and planned to pursue a degree in England. However, his extravagant lifestyle, including spending money on racing cars and women, led to his declaration of bankruptcy in 1962. Following their first meeting, Jenny Cheok and Sunny Ang gradually formed a deep romantic bond that went beyond mere friendship. Drawn to Ang's charisma, intelligence, and education, Jenny found herself captivated by him. He showered her with attention and occasionally taught her swimming and scuba diving, further strengthening their connection. Though their relationship was brief, it was intense enough for Jenny to express her desire to marry Ang, a sentiment he appeared to reciprocate. On August 27th, 1963, Sonny Ang and his girlfriend, Jenny Cheok, referred to in some accounts as his fiancée, set off cheerfully from the Singapore coast on a scuba diving expedition. They had rented a small boat, which was piloted by boatman Yusuf Ahmad. The trio made their way to Sisters Islands, a popular diving hotspot in Singapore. Following Sonny's instructions, Yusuf brought the boat to a halt in the waters between the two islands which make up Sisters Islands, Pulau Subar Laut and Pulau Subar Darat. Sonny came well prepared with a range of equipment, including a guide rope, 3 air tanks, 2 pairs of fins, 2 knives, a small axe, aqualung gear, and a transistor radio. However, the waters surrounding Sisters Islands were notoriously deep and hazardous with strong currents, making the area unsuitable for inexperienced divers like Jenny. After anchoring the boat, Jenny was the first to dive. Interestingly, Yusuf revealed that Sonny had hired him 2 months earlier to take the couple to another island. To guide Jenny underwater, Sonny tied a rope around her, as she was not an experienced diver. Yusuf, who had accompanied the couple on a previous diving trip, observed that Jenny lacked diving skills. About 10 minutes later, Jenny resurfaced. Upon her return, Sonny changed her air tank and let her dive in again on her own, though this time he did not go with her and remained on the boat in his swimming gear. After testing his own air tank, Sonny asked Yusuf for help, claiming it was leaking due to a faulty washer. Yusuf assisted in attempting to fix it, but the tank still malfunctioned. Throughout this time, Jenny remained submerged underwater. It was at that moment that Sonny tugged on the rope, only to discover that Jenny was no longer attached. He urgently asked Yusuf if he had seen her, but Yusuf claimed he hadn't. Ang pulled on the rope several more times, but there was still no sign of her. Concerned, Yusuf steered the boat towards St. John's Island to alert the authorities and call for help. As they headed towards St. John's Island, Yusuf noticed that Sonny didn't seem to be acting like a concerned boyfriend. He didn't urge Yusuf to hurry or show any signs of panic. Instead, he calmly changed from his swimming trunks into his regular clothes. Meanwhile, 5 other fishermen returned to the site where Jenny had dived and attempted to search for her underwater. Sonny stayed in the boat and did not join them. Despite their efforts, including a search by the fishermen and frogmen from the Royal Navy and Royal Air Force Changi Sub-Aqua Club, Jenny vanished without a trace. As the investigation began, suspicion immediately fell on Sonny Ang, who seemed uninterested in finding his girlfriend. Media reports stated that he stood in silence and watched police search operations from the bow of a boat. On the 6th day of searching, the Singapore police retrieved a single flipper that Jenny had been wearing when she disappeared. The flipper, found on the seabed, was completely broken, and the 2 cuts on them, located at the top and bottom, were unusually clean, indicating it may have been severed by a sharp weapon, such as a knife or razor blade. It was speculated that if the flipper had been cut, Jenny would have likely panicked due to the sudden lack of mobility with a severed flipper and subsequently drowned. The question on everybody's lips was whether the flipper had been cut accidentally or deliberately. Mounting evidence presented a strong likelihood of the latter having been the case. On the 6th of September 1963, Jenny Cheok's case was no longer one of a disappearance, but one of murder. 16 months after Jenny Cheok's disappearance, Sonny Ang was arrested and charged with her murder, a photograph showing a noticeable smirk on his face upon his arrest. The murder of Jenny Cheok, despite the lack of a body, created a stir in both Singapore and Malaysia. Although her body was lost to the sea and never recovered, the investigation uncovered indirect evidence that pointed towards Sunny Ang. However, in a case with no body or clear cause of death, convicting a suspect of murder proved difficult. During the trial, which began on the 26th of April 1965, the prosecution presented Sunny's apparent motive, suggesting he had premeditated Jenny's murder. The case was described by the prosecution as a, quote, perfect and, quote, almost perfect murder. Throughout the interrogation, Sunny remained composed, answering questions smoothly, which proved frustrating for the prosecution. The prosecution faced significant challenges, as they had no autopsy or cause of death report. They could only rely on circumstantial evidence surrounding the events. They also relied heavily on the testimony of Yusuf bin Ahmad, the boatman, as their principal witness. At the time of her disappearance, Jenny had an accident insurance policy worth around $400,000, a staggering sum considering her work as a waitress and barmaid. Oddly, Sunny Ang had arranged the policy for her. The day after Jenny vanished, Sunny filed a life insurance claim with the company. Additionally, just 2 weeks before her disappearance, Sunny accompanied Jenny to draft a will that named his mother as the sole beneficiary. One of Jenny's policies, valued at $150,000, had expired the day before the dive, but Sunny renewed it for just 5 more days. If Jenny had passed away after that period, no payout would have been made. Sunny Ang attempted to find lawyers to expedite the coroner's report on whether Jenny Cheok was deceased. This raised suspicions with the police, as it was still unclear whether she was deceased when Sunny pressured the insurance companies to release the payouts. There was speculation that another attempt on Jenny's life may have occurred before the ill-fated dive in August of 1963. Sunny had rented a sports car for a trip to Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, where he purchased accident insurance policies, $30,000 for himself and $100,000 for Jenny. On the return journey, the couple was involved in a car crash in the mountains near Furong. Sunny, a skilled driver, claimed he swerved to avoid hitting a dog. The worst damage was on the passenger side where Jenny was sitting, but she emerged with only minor bruises. It was just a few weeks following this, Sunny asked Jenny to join him on what he advertised as a romantic scuba diving experience. Sunny Ang maintained his innocence, insisting that Jenny Cheok was the woman he loved and planned to marry. When asked why he hadn't searched for her in the water, he suggested that he might have been attacked by sharks and explained that the fishermen who dived in were more experienced. He also stated that he allowed Jenny to dive first out of courtesy. Sunny Ang further claimed that Jenny had made significant progress in swimming and scuba diving, a stark contrast to multiple testimonies that highlighted her obvious lack of experience. He defended his decision to name his mother as the beneficiary of the insurance policies, saying it was to avoid raising suspicion in case anything happened to Jenny. Sunny Ang also denied having any motive to kill her. After evaluating the evidence and testimonies, the senior prosecutor presented 13 points of doubt to the jury. After 2 hours of deliberation on May 18, 1965, the jury unanimously convicted Sunny Ang of murder and sentenced him to death by hanging. After his appeal was denied by the federal court, Sunny Ang sought an evaluation of his mental state from judicial authorities in an attempt to avoid the death sentence. Following several assessments by experts in psychology and criminology, it was determined that Ang had a high IQ of 128 and was mentally sound, ruling out any possibility of him being exempt from punishment. While on death row, Ang initially showed no remorse for the murder of his girlfriend, convinced that he would not face execution even after the High Court's verdict. However, upon hearing that the Privy Council had rejected his appeal, Ang gradually began to accept his impending fate. 3 days before his execution, Ang, who had previously been an atheist, converted to Christianity and sought forgiveness from God for his actions. In his will, he also expressed remorse and offered apologies to his family. At dawn on February the 6th, 1967, 28-year-old Sunny Ang left his cell on death row and was taken to the gallows where he was executed. 3 months after Ang's conviction, Singapore gained independence from Malaysia on August 9th, 1965. Ang's trial marked one of the last jury trials in the country, as Singapore abolished the jury system entirely in January of 1970, shifting to bench trials for all criminal and civil cases. Jenny Cheok's body was never recovered from the sea, leaving a sense of unresolved loss. Jenny's story serves as a poignant reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring search for truth and justice.